Welcome to the second episode in the So Sorted story. And today we're going to deal with the definition of clutter, when stuff owns you. And we don't advocate minimalism. Instead, our practical philosophy is aimed at creating peace of mind, and making space for people and experiences, and doing good for the others and the environment. So our definition of the state of clutter is therefore subjective. It's when someone owns things beyond their threshold of comfort. We call that state when stuff owns you. We contrast our approach with that of the minimalist movement. Minimalism in this context is usually defined as a deliberate attempt to live with less. Living with less, preferably as little as possible, is a specific objective. That's not an ideal starting point in our philosophy of living organized and clutter-free. We've seen clients with lots of stuff, well curated, beautifully stored, displayed and used, and who are comfortable in their own skins and not stressed by all that stuff. Similarly, we see many clients who don't have a lot and by the average standard, and yet they feel that their lives are filled with too much stuff. So our definition of what constitutes clutter, therefore, aims to draw a pragmatic squiggle that will be different for each person at any point in time. Just a note on points in time. We notice that people tend to accumulate things until their children leave home, or if childless, until they retire, or until another impactful life event causes their life trajectory to change. Such an event could be anything, expected or unexpected, that has a significant impact. We regularly see some of the following examples: illness, losing a loved one, or even a favorite pet, divorce, children leaving home, retirement, moving, or emigrating. I have a story of a point in time event that I often relate to many of my clients and friends, and it relates to an elderly client who lived in a particularly fashionable, horsey, peri-urban area. She lived alone, and she was brutally attacked in her home. And she survived, and then she insisted on staying in this home, surrounded by a lifetime of memories. She appeared to be a classical hoarder, and when subjected to the terrible trauma of the attack, it tipped her over the edge. And she was probably suffering from what's known as Miss Havisham syndrome. Miss Havisham was a character in a Charles Dickens book, Great Expectations. The syndrome is also known as dyspossophobia or senile squalor syndrome. Before the attack, she suffered a number of traumatic life events, going through a divorce, losing her job, a mental breakdown. But she also responded very poorly to her adult daughter leaving home. Her books were all filed alphabetically, meticulously, up until the year that her daughter left home. After that, all her books were piled willy-nilly all over the home. We even found a jar of her daughter's tonsils on her bedside table. Classic Miss Havisham syndrome is actually about hoarding pets. My client owned 24 Dachshunds. The paperwork related to the pets was meticulous. She even filed the toenail clippings of the dogs. They were filed chronologically and alphabetically. Paranoia is also associated with Miss Havisham syndrome. Our client was convinced that she had stored money in the books on her bookshelves, and when we were clearing out her home, we had to flip through every single one of the books to check for money before the books were donated to charity. We did not find a single cent. And only intervention, which was facilitated by her daughter, and together with a very, very sensitive approach by our team, convinced her to allow us to clean up, help her downsize and move somewhere safe. Our client never admitted that she had a problem. Even on the last day she came back to the home, and she sat crying in a chair in her kitchen, saying that she wanted to come back to her house because it was her dream to die there. So despite our best intentions, it ended traumatically for her. And I actually started going to counselling afterwards. And I still do regularly because we deal with many clients like this, to debrief my own feelings about these kinds of situations. So in the context of the story, I have a pro tip, and it really is about developing healthy collecting habits. To have a better chance of avoiding significant point-in-time issues, we think that it's wise to develop healthy collecting habits. And we suggest that you form these habits while you're relatively young and in a relatively stress-free state of mind. The story contains many tips on how to do that. We define clutter as that collection of stuff that no one in your household uses or otherwise benefits from, and that causes you or someone in your household some not insignificant stress. This definition seems simple, but it's a mouthful, and we'll discuss our significant insights. So the first insight is that related to digital clutter. Clutter can be digital. A music collection that's not well curated when set to shuffle causes you more frustration than joy. It's an excellent example of digital or potential digital clutter. A digital filing system that doesn't enable you to lay your hands on an important document when you need it is another. You may have to organize or curate it better. Fortunately, this problem is increasingly solved for us by technology companies. For instance, they create intelligent playlists out of observed preferences on music apps. They similarly embed powerful search engines into their apps so that, provided you know how to use these tools, you can find your needle in your haystack in split seconds. Online storage solutions and services are becoming increasingly powerful and are, for the most part, free or at least affordable. Clutter can also be paper or task-related. It can be an accumulation of admin tasks, paperwork, or bills to pay. That paperwork or admin that causes you consternation. So the next insight I'd like to deal with is compromise. An important implication of our definition of clutter is the principle of compromise that's required in any household. One person's clutter may be another's security blanket, and there's no right or wrong here, nor is there a magic wand. Just suffice to say, it would be best if you could reach a compromise with your roommates. I have many clients who ask me the question, what do I do if my husband isn't on board with decluttering, or my wife or my spouse? And that really leads me to the next definition, which is focus on the bigger picture. You have to weigh the harm, which is usually stress or frustration, against the benefits. And you and your roommates, if you have any, really need to judge the ideal outcome. In evaluating conflicting interests, you need to try and work out if the clutter stress that you and your roomie are feeling is minor irritation or if it's really a big deal. We like to talk about zenning, or not sweating the small stuff. Adopting this attitude towards potential clutter is a good habit that benefits all relationships, including the one that you have with yourself. From this discussion, you can see that the benefit may be and is often emotional. The next issue that I'd like to deal with is regret. It would be ideal if you also weighed the current clutter-induced stress against potential future regret. For instance, what would you do if a week after throwing away that useless gadget, you realize that it's an essential component of a thing that you haven't used in a while but you now need? This example gives us one good reason why decluttering and organizing your stuff go together. Nevertheless, even when you've thought about this clearly, it would be prudent to expect some regret and to distinguish in your planning between emotional regret. For example, you sold your granny's copper pot that you weren't using and now your sister wants it, for example, and against practical regret. You purged a whole bunch of charging cables and you now need them. It's also really easy to overestimate this problem. I'd like to talk about longevity next. Clothes aside, which we'll come back to the category of clothes, if you have not used something for a significant amount of time, you're not likely to need that thing in the future. Keep in mind that the time frame will vary per item. Um, is it something you use regularly or only in particular seasons, or only, for example, when you're away on holiday? In this context, the past is an excellent predictor of the future. I have a story related to this, and I had a client who had a magnificent watch collection. We noticed that he only, however, wore his smartwatch, and he was an active user of the smartwatch and all the wellness and convenience apps that came together with it and functionality. We pried a little, and he acknowledged that he wasn't likely to ever wear his watches again. So we helped him choose the watch that was most meaningful to him to keep, and it happened to be a family heirloom. And then we sent the rest of the collection off to a specialist auctioneer where he got really fair value for it. This is really an example of how people outgrow their collections and they move on. Our client never looked back. Speaking of fashion and decor, when evaluating whether you're likely to want to use something in a fashion category again, be it fashion or decor, you need to ask yourself whether it is classical and timeless or whether it's a fad item. Experts and online resources can help you judge this, of which there's plenty of resources out there. We'll come back to the idea that it helps to identify or to develop your own style, because then you can more easily avoid being the victim of fashion fads or cycles. Judge carefully whether you want to keep clothes of different sizes as well, because you may have a tendency to gain and lose weight. The next issue I would like to deal with is bringing joy to others. A source of discomfort that we'd like to add to your emotional equilibrium is the joy of others when others use your unused stuff. It's quite a mouthful. So let's say you have a well-organized drawer of unused electronics that doesn't bother you in the least. So it's out the way, it's not in your face. Somewhere in your circle of influence, there is a person that can use that stuff. Instead of you allowing it to sit in the drawer all neatly stacked and packed away and it becoming obsolete. It's also kinder to the environment to ensure the maximum use out of something before recycling it. So I offer a pro tip here, just to end this section on definitions. Get creative. A note on how much we love the resultant creativity of this philosophy that we follow. One of our friends has a neighborhood library in front of her home. It's actually just a wooden box with a glass front, and inside it has 2 shelves, and you can drop off books or you can take some and read them and pass them on or swap them out. But it's genius. There's another example. We support a charity that collects at least 2 million rand a year from selling unwanted, new or slightly worn, upmarket and fashionable clothing. Again, it's genial compassion. I offer another pro tip here. We want to point out one other benefit of adopting our definition of clutter and living more mindfully. We've all paged through decor magazines or home magazines that showcase a room or a home that we fell in love with. That magazine staged those pictures. The person staging it removed all their clutter and organized the place at least to some extent. Similarly, homes are staged by estate agents when they're up for sale. We don't suggest that you live in a magazine or a show house ready home if that's not your thing. But serenity has integrity. It's contagious and you'll love living in it. Also using this standard, how do other people view my space? You ask yourself that question. It can guide you when making fine judgments about clutter and disorganization. So, in summary to this episode, our definition of clutter is more than just a definition. It's a practical philosophy of how to live your best life. In general, win-win opportunities are rare. In our humble view, this is an easy one to bag. In the next installment of the So Sorted story, we take a look at how to approach a decluttering project. So stay tuned.